Have you ever been humiliated by someone who was supposed to protect you? I was standing at the marina counter, and the sun was so bright it hurt my eyes. The smell of salt water and diesel fuel mixed in the air, and I could hear the sound of ropes creaking against metal, waves lapping against the hulls. I placed $23,000 in cash on the counter. Crisp bills, all hundreds, counted twice before I left the house. My hands were steady, but my heart was not. And that's when I heard it, that laugh. High-pitched, theatrical, designed to draw attention. My stepmother's laugh. The one she'd perfected over the years, sharp enough to cut, loud enough to make sure everyone turned to look. "Oh my God, Daniel, look at her," she said, loud enough for the entire dock office to hear. Paying in cash like some kind of, I don't even know what. Like she just robbed a convenience store or something. My father stood beside her, silent. He always was. That silence had become his signature over the last 15 years, ever since he brought her into our lives, 6 months after my mother died. 6 months. I was 11 years old, and I remember thinking that grief was supposed to last longer than that. That love was supposed to leave a deeper mark. But here we were. She was dripping in designer labels. Her sunglasses alone cost more than most people's monthly rent, and I was standing there in my simple white linen shirt and jeans, holding a receipt for a service fee while she made sure everyone knew I didn't belong. The young man behind the counter looked uncomfortable. He glanced between us, unsure whether to defend me or stay out of it. I gave him a small smile. The kind that says, "It's okay, I'm used to this." But I wasn't. You never really get used to it. You just learn to breathe through it. Stay with me until the end, it's worth it. Before I tell you why that moment changed everything, let me take you back. I grew up in a house that smelled like my mother's lavender soap and old books. She was a literature teacher, gentle and steady, the kind of woman who believed words could change the world. She died of an aneurysm on a Tuesday morning in March. No warning. One moment she was making pancakes, and the next moment she was gone. I was 11, my brother was 8. And my father my father disappeared into himself. For 6 months, he barely spoke. He moved through the house like a ghost, and we moved around him, trying not to break the fragile silence. I learned to cook. I learned to do laundry. I learned to be small and quiet and useful because I thought that's what would bring him back to us. And then she arrived, Victoria. My father met her at some conference in Chicago. She was 20 years younger than him, confident and polished in a way my mother never was. My mother had been beautiful in a quiet way, soft hands, soft voice, soft presence. Victoria was loud. Everything about her was designed to be noticed. Her perfume announced her before she entered a room. Her heels clicked on hardwood floors like a countdown. Her laugh could shatter glass. At first I tried. I really did. I was 12 years old, and I wanted my father to be happy. I thought maybe she could help him heal. Maybe she could help us all heal. But Victoria didn't come to heal anyone. She came to claim territory. Within a year, all of my mother's things were gone. The lavender soap replaced with something French and expensive. The family photos taken down and stored in boxes in the attic. My mother's piano, the one she'd played every evening, sold to make room for Victoria's meditation space. My brother and I learned to exist in the margins of our own home. We learned which conversations to avoid, which moods to navigate, which versions of ourselves to present to keep the peace. My father had married Victoria. And in doing so, he had chosen her version of reality over ours. I was 16 when I realized I was invisible in my own family. We were at a restaurant, one of those places with cloth napkins and waiters who describe every dish like it's a work of art. And Victoria was telling a story about her college years. She was animated, gesturing with her wine glass, and my father was watching her with this look of complete absorption. Like she was the only person in the room. I tried to add something to the conversation. Something small, something relevant. I don't even remember what it was. But Victoria turned to me with this expression, not quite annoyed, not quite amused, and said, "Sweetheart, the adults are talking." I was 16 years old. And she called me sweetheart like it was an insult. My father said nothing. And that was the moment I stopped being who they thought I was. I graduated high school with honors. I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college because Victoria had convinced my father that they needed to prioritize their own future, and college funds were outdated concepts that created entitled children. I transferred to a state university. I lived in a basement apartment that flooded every spring. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches and told myself I was building character. I studied business and finance because I understood something fundamental. Money is freedom. Money is the ability to say no. Money is the difference between choosing your life and having your life chosen for you. My mother had left me something. A small trust fund meant to be accessed when I turned 25. $50,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a foundation. She'd set it up, through her own parents, deliberately kept separate from my father's finances. I think she knew. Even then, before Victoria, before everything fell apart, I think my mother knew that I might need something that belonged only to me. When I turned 25, I took that money and I invested it. Not in anything flashy or risky. I studied. I learned. I spent 2 years reading everything I could about real estate investment, about market cycles, about the difference between looking rich and being rich. I bought a duplex in a neighborhood that was just starting to turn around. I lived in one unit and rented out the other. I saved every penny. I bought another property, and another. I learned to fix things myself: plumbing, electrical, drywall. I learned to negotiate with contractors, to read building codes, to understand zoning laws. Have you ever felt something like this? That quiet determination that comes not from ambition, but from necessity? Not from wanting to prove something, but from needing to survive? By the time I was 32, I owned 8 properties. By 35, I owned 17. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something real, something solid, something that couldn't be taken away with a laugh or a silence. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't announce my success. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't show up to family gatherings, the few I was still invited to, wearing designer clothes or driving expensive cars. I wore simple clothes. I drove a reliable sedan. I smiled politely at Victoria's comments about my little rental properties and my adorable independence. Because here's what I learned. People who need you to see their power are not actually powerful. They're performing, and I was done performing. My brother understood. He'd built his own life too, becoming a veterinarian in Oregon, as far from our father and Victoria as he could get without leaving the country. We talked every Sunday. We'd learned to be each other's family the way children of broken homes often do. But that was only the beginning. 3 years ago, I bought a boat, not just any boat. A 52-foot yacht. Custom interior, twin engines, capable of sleeping 8 people comfortably. I named her Lavender after my mother. I didn't buy her to show off. I bought her because when I was a child, before my mother died, we used to go to the marina on Sunday afternoons. We'd walk along the docks and she'd make up stories about the boats. Where they'd been, what adventures they'd had. She'd say, "Someday, sweetheart, you'll have your own boat, and you'll take it wherever you want to go." It took me 43 years, but I kept that promise. I kept the boat at a private marina, one of those places where discretion is part of the service. I didn't post photos. I didn't invite people I didn't trust. It was mine. My sanctuary. My mother's memory preserved in teak and brass and the smell of salt water. And then, 3 months ago, the marina management changed hands. New owners, new policies, new fees. One of those fees required in-person payment for what they called premium service coordination, essentially priority scheduling for maintenance and slip access. $23,000. Annual fee. I could have written a check. I could have wired the money, but I've always preferred cash for large transactions. It's tangible. It's final. There's no chargebacks, no disputes, no paper trail for people who don't need to know my business. I didn't know my father and Victoria would be there that day. They'd recently bought a small cabin cruiser, 28 feet. Basic model, the kind you take out for afternoon trips and sunset cocktails. Victoria had been posting about it constantly. Living our best life, finally enjoying the fruits of our labor. She'd tagged the marina in 6 posts. I didn't know it yet, but the world was about to change. So there I was, standing at that counter, and Victoria's voice was cutting through the air like a knife through silk. "Cash!" she was saying, shaking her head dramatically. "How very ... rustic. Daniel, can you imagine? I haven't paid for anything in cash in years. It's so ... I don't know ... drug dealer." A few other boat owners in the office were trying not to stare. The young man behind the counter, his name tag said Marcus, was counting the bills with careful precision. His ears turning red, my father finally spoke. "Sweetheart, maybe we should. No, no, Victoria interrupted, her hand on his arm. I'm just concerned. I mean, she's always been a bit eccentric, but this is really something. Where does someone even get that much cash? I'm legitimately worried about her. She said it with such false concern, such theatrical compassion that I almost admired the performance. Almost. Marcus finished counting. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe respect. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said to me, ignoring Victoria entirely, your payment is confirmed. And I have your updated service schedule here. Lavender is scheduled for hull cleaning on the 15th, and the engine service is set for the 23rd. Is there anything else you need today? That's perfect, Marcus. Thank you. Victoria had gone very quiet. I watched her process what she'd just heard. The way Marcus had spoken to me. The name of a boat, the scheduled services. Wait, she said slowly. Your boat? I picked up my receipt. The sun was streaming through the window and dust motes danced in the light. The smell of coffee from the office machine mixed with the ever-present scent of the sea. Yes, I said simply. My boat. Which one? Marcus, bless him, kept his face perfectly neutral. But I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. I could have been cruel. I could have made her guess. I could have led her down the dock and watched her face as we passed the modest boats, the weekend cruisers, the family fishing vessels, until we reached the private slips where the serious yachts were moored. But cruelty requires energy I've never been willing to spend on her. The 52-foot Hatteras in Slip 317, I said. The one with the custom teak deck and the blue accent line. I watched the color drain from Victoria's face. She knew that boat. Everyone at the marina knew that boat. It was one of the most beautiful vessels docked there. The kind people stopped to admire. The kind that represented not just wealth, but taste, care, and genuine appreciation for the craft of sailing. My father was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe I'd been invisible for so long that the idea of me being visible, really visible, undeniably present was more shocking than the boat itself. Victoria's voice had lost all its theatrical quality. It was small now, confused. That's gotta be worth ... It doesn't matter what it's worth, I said quietly. And I meant it. The boat wasn't about the money. It never had been. Share this with someone who would understand. Marcus handed me a folder. Your ownership documents, ma'am. Updated as of today. And the service team asked me to remind you that they'll need access to the engine room next week. Of course. I'll make sure everything's unlocked. I turned to leave, and that's when my father finally found his voice. Wait, he said. I don't single quotes T ... How did you ... I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not disbelief, but something that looked almost like grief. As if he was realizing in that moment how much of my life he'd missed. How many years had passed while he was choosing silence over difficult conversations, choosing peace over presence, choosing a new wife's happiness over his own daughter's dignity. I worked, Dad, I said simply. I worked hard. For a very long time. Victoria was still frozen, her designer sunglasses perched on top of her head, her perfect lipstick suddenly looking too bright against her pale face. I wanted to say something cutting. Something that would hurt the way her words had hurt me for 20 years. But standing there, holding my receipt and my ownership documents, I realized something that changed everything. Her opinion didn't matter anymore. It never had. The power she had held over me, the power I'd given her, had always been rooted in my need for my father's approval. My desperate hope that he would see me, defend me, choose me. But I'd built an entire life without his approval. I'd become someone my mother would be proud of. Not because I'd proven anything to Victoria or my father, but because I'd proven something to myself. I was capable. I was strong. I was enough. I hope you enjoy your afternoon on the water, I said to both of them. And I meant it. Their happiness or unhappiness was no longer connected to mine. I walked out of that office, and the sun was warm on my face. The sound of the boats, the cry of the seagulls, the gentle rhythm of the waves, it all felt different somehow, cleaner, lighter. Marcus caught up with me before I reached my car. Ma'am, he said, a little breathless, I just ... I wanted to say. That was handled with real class. I see a lot of things working here. A lot of ... drama. But you... That was different. I smiled at him. He was young, maybe 23 or 24. The age I'd been when I started building my life with $50,000. And a dream my mother had planted in my childhood. Thank you, Marcus, but honestly, she doesn't matter enough to be dramatic about. He grinned. That's exactly what I mean. I drove home that day, and I didn't cry. I didn't call my brother and rage about the injustice of it all. I didn't post anything on social media or tell the story to friends. I just went home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on my balcony watching the sunset. The next morning, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. I'm sorry, he said. No preamble, no excuses, just those 2 words, and I realized he was crying. I'm sorry, he said again. I should have been better. I should have been your father. I should have protected you. I should have seen you. I let myself. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The possibility of it. I know, Dad, I said quietly. Can I take you to lunch? Can we talk? I know I don't deserve it, but yes, I said. We can talk. Because here's what I learned in all those years of silence and survival. Holding on to anger is like holding on to poison and expecting the other person to get sick. And I was tired of being sick. I was tired of carrying the weight of other people's failures. We met the following week. Just the 2 of us. He came alone, and I could see how hard that was for him, how much courage it took to step outside the narrative Victoria had constructed for their life together. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his grief after my mother died, how he'd felt like he was drowning, how Victoria had seemed like a life raft but had turned out to be an anchor. He told me he'd spent years telling himself that his children were resilient, that we'd be fine, that his happiness mattered too. All the stories people tell themselves when they're choosing the wrong thing. I should have fought for you, he said. Both of you, you and your brother. I should have been stronger. Yes, I said. You should have. He flinched, but he didn't argue. And that, more than anything, told me he was finally ready to hear the truth. But I survived, I continued, and maybe I'm stronger because of it. Not because of what you did, but because of what I chose to do in spite of it. He reached across the table and took my hand. His hand was older than I remembered, weathered and marked with age spots I hadn't noticed before. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. Your mother would be so proud of you. And there it was. The thing I'd been waiting to hear for 32 years. I didn't cry. Not then. But later, driving home, I had to pull over because the tears came so suddenly I couldn't see the road. Respect does not erase the past. It simply teaches us how to breathe again. My relationship with my father is different now. We talk every few weeks. He's still with Victoria. Some battles aren't mine to fight, but he makes time for me separately. He came to see Lavender last month, and I watched him walk the deck, touching the rails with something like reverence. She'd have loved this, he said. Your mother. She'd have loved this so much. I know, I said. That's why I named her Lavender. He cried then, and I held his hand while he did. Victoria and I don't speak. We don't need to. She exists in her world, and I exist in mine, and occasionally those worlds intersect at family gatherings that I now attend on my own terms. She's never apologized. She's never acknowledged what happened at the marina. But I've noticed she's quieter now, smaller, as if the discovery of my success diminished something in her that depended on my failure. I don't take pleasure in that, but I don't feel guilty about it either. My brother visited last summer, and we took Lavender out for a week, just the 2 of us. We sailed up the coast, stopped at small towns, ate at waterfront restaurants, and talked about our mother in ways we never had before. About her gentleness, yes, but also about her strength. About the way she'd loved books because they taught her that other worlds were possible. About the way she'd loved us fiercely, completely, without condition. She'd be so damn proud, my brother said one evening as we watched the sun set over the water. She'd be proud of both of us, I said. We made it. We actually made it, and we had. Not in spite of our pain, but through it. Not by forgetting what happened, but by choosing what happened next. Someone asked me recently if I ever regret not confronting Victoria more directly that day at the marina. If I wish I'd been harsher, more theatrical in my victory. And the truth is, no, because the victory wasn't in humiliating her. The victory was in not needing to. The victory was in standing there, holding my receipt, knowing that I'd built something real and lasting in mine. The victory was in walking away without anger, without bitterness, without the need for her validation or her defeat. The victory was in breathing freely for the first time in 30 years. Truth does not shout. It simply waits to be heard. I still own those properties. I still sail lavender whenever I can. I still live simply quietly without the need to perform my success for an audience. Because I learned something my mother tried to teach me when I was too young to understand. The most important thing you can own is yourself, your dignity, your peace, your truth. Everything else is just details. And sometimes late at night, when I'm anchored in some quiet cove and the stars are reflected in the water like scattered diamonds, I talk to my mother. I tell her about my life, about the hard years and the good ones, about the way I've learned to be strong without being hard, to be successful without being cruel, to be free without being angry. And I think she hears me. I think she knows. I think she's proud. If stories like this remind you what dignity feels like, subscribe. You belong here. And don't miss the next story. It is something truly unforgettable.